What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of Top 10 Best Fire Emblem Heroes Arts. Alright, for those that are possibly wondering where part 1 is, well, it's already up on my channel, so for those that want to see numbers 10 through 6, I suggest you see that video first, then come back to this video for the remaining 5. And oh boy, is going to be a doozy and a half. Alright, that being said, let's get back into it. Moving on next at number 5, we have Brave Hector. Alright, one thing about when it comes to Hector is that he's known for a lot of things, largely having to do with how strong he is in Fire Emblem Blazing Sword. In fact, it's that strength that has given him the fan nickname of Hector the Rector. And as someone who is doing a Hector normal mode playthrough of Fire Emblem Blazing Sword, I can see where he's getting that from. That being said, honestly, one thing said about this is basically, even with that, his main thing is, when it comes to dealing with his problems, it's always a hit first, ask questions never. However, there's always someone he always ends up looking up to. And that just so happens to be his brother Uther, which honestly really does show a lot, even though he doesn't outwardly show it in Fire Emblem Blazing Sword. Of course, when Uther ends up dying with an illness, he ends up dealing with Hector ends up dealing with his brother's death in his own sort of way. That being said, honestly, what perfect way to show that in Fire Emblem Heroes when he was essentially elected to get a Brave Vault. And of course, it gives him a solid green armor scheme that basically gives a loving tribute to his brother Uther in all but name. Basically showing how much of a man he's become if it wasn't for his brother's outwardly guidance. Which honestly really fits for the guy. And even though Uther's in the game now, it really fits that Brave Hector shows how much of a man he is if it is because of his brother. That being said, now all we need is Bearded Hector, possibly as a reference for how he was in Fire Emblem Binding Blade. Oh, right. I forgot. Moving on next at number 4, we have Fallen Berkut. Yeah, didn't think I'd basically focus on a Valentia character, but when it came down to Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia, I really wasn't counting on a remake of Gaiden, to say the least. And this is from someone who was growing up when Gaiden was released. Yeah, no joke. It came out around either when I was 1 or when I was just a baby. Either way, that being said, when it comes down to it, I'm glad I got Echoes. Because again, it introduced a lot of new characters. One of the most notable ones being Berkut, voiced by the legendary Ian Sinclair. And honestly, for anyone who doesn't know, look up the video where look up the scene where he basically goes, "Nothing but lies, 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 lies," and you'll see how legendary he is at that. But that being said, honestly, I think near the end game when he eventually showed up to be a surprise boss possessed by Duma. Yeah, that is one of the more crazier moments the game ever gave us. And it's at this point you notice that stuff was getting real. Especially since he basically sacrificed his girlfriend Renee in order to get all that power. That being said, how would Fire Emblem Heroes basically top that? By basically utilizing this scene as the art for this scene as the art for his fallen alt. And honestly, even with that, I have to say just holy crap, they went the whole 9 yards. From the manic expression on his face to the almost ethereal feel that you get from his armor. And again, even further, they actually showed the infernal form of Renee in her witch state right behind him, basically as a reference to his boss battle. And honestly, yeah. Bravo, IS. Bravo. Now if only I could beat this battle in real life, we would be in business. I swear, I keep screwing up. Moving on next at number 3, we have Ascended Tiki. Yeah. Honestly, when it comes down to it, a lot of characters on this list thus far, kind of characters that many people would essentially know of. Especially Fire Emblem fans. And one thing that many of us tend to know about are the Monakeets, which are mostly due to them being dragon individuals that take the form of young girls. That being said, I think the most iconic one is Tiki, which, again, really says a lot. We see Tiki in both ways, shape, and form. From her child form in Shadow Dragon and New Mystery of the Emblem, and then awakening as a young woman. Which really does say a lot when you think about it. Yet, it's Shadow Dragon Tiki that gets the most attention. Even becoming a Vocaloid in Tokyo Mirage Sessions. By the way, where's Vocaloid Tiki IS? And heck, even an emblem in Fire Emblem Engage. Which again, it's gonna take me a while to get that because I am not touching the Engage DLC with a 10-foot pole. Or unless I have to. However, that being said, honestly, when it comes down to it, it's her ascended form that is ironically one of my favorites. And that's natural, especially in terms of and that's because of the art. As basically, it's just Tiki who is basically adding a bit of blue embellishment to make her seem a lot more like Marth. And honestly, I gotta say, I can see why they did that. Since even in Shadow Dragon, after being, snapped out from her brainwashing courtesy of Medius, thanks to Bantu, she basically saw Tiki as Tiki basically saw Marth as, basically an older brother figure. I mean, granted, as much as she sees Bantu as a father figure or a grandfather figure, she largely sees Marth as a big brother figure, to the point that she either calls him Marmar or Big Brother Marth. Which again really does say a lot once you realize that she also sees Chris as a figure, like either an uncle or an aunt. Which again really makes sense once you realize how in Awakening, Tiki ended up thinking of Lucina as Marth. Because she more or less idolizes him and wants to be as strong as him. And it's that ascended alt that basically made it seem like that dream actually came true for her. And honestly, the fact that we've gotten a few more ascended alts really does say a lot, but they haven't hit as much as this, which really says a lot. Moving on next at number 2, we have Fallen Ike. Oh boy. Yeah, speaking of Fallen alt, most people wouldn't have expected Ike to get one. But honestly, when it comes down to it, surprisingly enough, IS outdid themselves yet again with this alt. I mean, first off, when you think about it, the art for Ike's Fallen alt basically just seems full-on gritty. Almost like a dark comic book style to him. And actually, almost like it's something out of, I don't know, well, the anime Berserk. Which is kind of fitting since, as we already know, Ike was essentially based on the character Guts, the main character of Berserk, who went through a lot of stuff. So basically, seeing Ike looking like he was drawn in the Berserk style looks really awesome. But the real reason I can appreciate this is that I did not know this was from an alternate telling of what happened from a cipher card that shows what happens if Ike ended up touching Laurent's medallion and got driven to madness. I mean, that's just crazy, and I love it. Really does say a lot. I mean, granted, Fallen to Do is even crazier, but yeah, at least Fallen Ike was something that I didn't even know was a thing. Yeesh. Finally, at number 1, we have Brave Erica. Yeah. Started this list countdown with Sacred Stones, ending it with Sacred Stones. And surprisingly enough, we had to end it with one of the main characters, in this case, Erica. And naturally for most people, Erica is largely known for wanting peace, and just more or less not wanting to fight all the time, only realizing that she has to fight in order to ensure that peace. That being said, throughout most of the game, and throughout her supports with Ephraim, you realize how much she more or less idolizes him, which honestly is understandable to how it drives her to become strong. And honestly, her Brave Alt definitely did that, because when she got it, yeah, I was not expecting her to basically get an alt that basically made her look a lot like her brother Ephraim. Which, honestly, definitely fits her to say the least. And honestly, it's one of the best alts I've ever seen in my life. That is unless your name is Ephraim and you've gotten a good strength level up. Yeah, really says a lot. Those are my top 10 best Fire Emblem Heroes arts. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you all. Wait, what was that? What? Oh God. Oh God, no, Erica, don't! Ah!